Good evening, everyone. Good evening to you. All right, we'll try it again. Good evening to you. Good evening. All right, there you go. We want to have your input. We want to make sure your voices are working because we want to be able to hear from you this evening. So it sounds like they are. Good evening. I'm Larry Clark. I am the chair of the Shreveport Capital Improvements Committee. And we're going to be talking with you this evening. And most importantly, we're here to hear from you, the community. And so we thank you for being here with us. Allow me to begin with introductions of people here. And the mayor, Tom Arsenault, says he's just here to be hearing and hear what you have to say, not to be introduced, but he's going to be introduced anyway, because I just did. So I'm glad, Mayor, thank you for being here. Also, the District A City Council representative, Ms. Tabitha Taylor, is here. Where'd she go? There, Tabby. Hi, my apologies. And she is a SUSLA alum, so she's back on campus. So my apologies and thank you for being here as well. Each city council person got to put up 2 individuals onto this committee, and the remaining 6 persons were put on the committee by Mayor Tom Arsenault. I'm going to ask our members, starting over on my far right here, just to introduce themselves, and if they are from a council district, to state which it is. So Hillary Woolery will start, and she was a mayor appointee. But if you were a city council member appointee, if you will, tell the audience the district that you represent as we come down.
Hi, my name is Hillary Woolery. I'm a lawyer at BRF, and I was appointed, as you said, by the mayor. Happy to be here.
All right, Louis R. Avalone, District C.
Christopher Coe, I'm an architect from the area representing District B, and thanks everyone for being here.
Good evening, R.J. Johnson, representing District G.
Good evening, Jackie Simon, representing District 8.
Good evening, rather. I'm Darren Dixon, I'm representing District F.
Good evening, Michael Lafitte, I'm representing District E.
Good evening, I'm Rudolph Glass, I'm representing District A.
Good evening, Terry Moore, appointed by the mayor.
Hi, good to be with y'all. Grant Knuckles, District D. Hi, Scott Ward, representing District D.
And I'm Tom Dark. I'm the CAO for the city, and I'm kind of the staff for the committee.
Mr. Dark, do you want to recognize people from the city that you have here? When you come up. Okay, very good. Excuse me. Mayor Arsenault created the Capital Improvements Committee. However, over 2/3 of the committee members were appointed by city council members. I want to thank and applaud members of the city council for the quality and diversity of the people put forward for the Capital Improvements Committee. Along with Mayor Arsenault's people, the committee is exceptionally talented and a dedicated class and group of citizens. Mayor Arsenault has strongly communicated to the committee of the importance of the city council in relation to our work. We understand that the city council has the final word on whether to call a bond election and the composition of a bond package. We are committed to bring forward a strong, focused community plan for a bond improvements election this coming spring. And ultimately, it's you, the voters, that will decide whether any of these things we talk about this evening will be passed and become part of what we will have for the city. So this is an important night. Mr. Tom Dark is going to come forward now to give you a little bit of an overview of what's involved here and for this evening.
Thank you, Larry. And we really do appreciate the folks at Southern for having us tonight, and thank you very much for all of you who came out. When he asked me to explain it, the easiest way to explain what a bond issue is, it's just when the city takes out a mortgage. You know, if you're buying a house, you might take out a mortgage for 30 years. Well, when the city does a bond issue, it is effectively borrowing money for 30 years to do improvements to invest in our city. And when that happens, and particularly when it happens where a bond issue is being paid back from property taxes, it has to go to the voters first. And you know, this is a big deal because this is one that, if whatever passes, will over some gradual period of time result in a certain amount of property tax increase. Not a lot, but a little bit. We want to be mindful of the fact that the last 2 times the city has tried to do bond issues, in 2019 and 2021, they've had a total of 8 propositions on the ballot, and only one of those has passed. We would like to do better. And one of the ways we think that doing better is possible is simply asking for public opinion. We have assembled a very good group of folks. They have heard presentations from city department heads and from other staff people and have developed the very first part of the list. And we handed that out to you as you came in tonight. But a good bond issue is partly what staff thinks is a good idea. It is partly what city council members think is a good idea, and it's very much partly what citizens think. And so for that reason, we're trying to have these meetings. We're having 4 of them. We have another one tomorrow night at LSU. We have 2 next week at Huntington High and at Valencia Park next week. We are trying to get whatever public input we can so that we can add your projects to the list and the committee can then consider them. One of the things that we want to point out, just to be clear, is that there is a difference between what you put in a bond issue and what you just do with your regular maintenance, or at least what you should do with your regular maintenance. If the street in front of your house has a pothole, that's maintenance. If the ditch in front of your house needs digging out, that's maintenance. If the big ditch behind your subdivision is too little and is flooding people, that's a bond issue. If your street needs major reconstruction, that's a bond issue. If you want something that isn't here now, that is absolutely a bond issue. But what we've done, we've asked a number of city representatives to be here, and so there are people here from police and from fire and from water and sewer and SPAR and Public Works, so that if you have a question about something else that's not just bond issue stuff, they're here and they're not going to leave when this is over. You can ask them anything you want. The way this generally is going to work is that this is actually being recorded, so you'll need to come when you have your question, come up to the microphone over here. We will try to write down everything. If you'll tell us who you are and where you live, that will help. If you want to tell us that, my street needs doing, it would be helpful if you would tell us, okay, does it all need doing, or does it need doing between this street and that street? Things like that, because it'll make it easier for us to ask the city engineer and everybody to start coming up with cost estimates. The other thing is that we have a list already that's $300-something million. There will be plenty more added by citizens. And at some point, we'll have to work on the hardest task, and the committee will have to figure out what we can do. But what we're trying to do is figure out what the needs are first. So that's where you come in, and we would appreciate all the input you can give us. Would everybody who's here from the city please stand up just so everybody know who you are? Thank y'all so much for coming. We appreciate the applause too. Thank you. Okay, Larry, you got anything before they start? Thank you all again.
Thank you, Mr. Dark. I also want to recognize, I think that Dr. Gantt is still here. Yes, she said, sit next to the mayor. So Dr. Audrey Gantt is the chancellor at Southern University Shreveport. And like some of the people here on this panel, she's a native of Shreveport who's come back to Shreveport to provide leadership. And so I think it might be helpful for the audience to know, put your hand up if you're a native of Shreveport. If you are a native of Shreveport, how many are here that are natives of Shreveport? That's a big, big proportion of the committee here. And for those otherwise, for example, I was here from 81 to 94, came back in 2014 till now. So although I'm not a native, I've spent more of my adult life here than anywhere else. I think that's what you'll find with other members here as well. So this is a committee that's very, very much vested in Shreveport. And we want to hear from you now. And as Mr. Dark said, that we'd like you to come forward. That's where you'll be speaking over there, and to identify yourself and your address, and to focus on the comments appropriate for a bond project proposal. And if you will, limit your time to 3 minutes, and that'll allow us to have everyone get to give input. And if we have more time later, depending what happens, how many are here, we can adjust perhaps to provide a further opportunity. But that's what we're going to do to start. And so there is no particular order of how you will come forward. I will be acting as the time police person in terms of keeping you to time. And so I will tell you when you have 30 seconds left or so. Thank you very much. The first person would like to come forward, please. Thank you for coming forward.
Good evening.
Good evening to you.
My name is Berta Jones. I live at 2622 Kemp Lane, on the corner of Kemp Lane and Audrey Lane at the dead end. The streets stay flooded when it rains. It has nowhere to go. Okay, thank you. And as you turn from Kemp Lane to Audrey Lane, it's a big hole right there. The streets are just terrible. I've lived there since 1972. Nothing that I know of have been done to our neighborhood. It's in ruins, really. And I'm just really hoping that at some point soon that something can be done for our streets, our drainage, and whatever else. But it's very important that we get something done because it's tearing up our cars.
That's
It's really bad, and I just hope that since our neighborhood is over 50-some years old, that something can be done to the entire University Park is where I live. And I really wish some consideration would be done for our neighborhood.
Thank you for coming forward. And as Mr. Dark said, they're going to be noting for those things that seem like they may be things that are not a total rebuild, which wouldn't be a bond issue, but maybe as a maintenance. But those things will be noted this evening in terms of the problem you talk about, how it might be addressed either way will be noted. So thank you for coming forward. The next person, please. Good evening to you.
Good evening. My name is Sandra Mack, and my address is 2045 Lanier Street. And there's a ditch that goes from Willis all the way back to McCain Creek. The only reason why Lanier and on to Willis is somewhat kept is because myself and maybe one or two other people call every year to get that ditch cleaned out. Every year we have to call. My thinking is that the ditch should be on a regular cleanup cycle. I shouldn't have to call, none of us should have to call every year to get that done. And when they do it, they only clean the part on Lanier to Willis. From LaGuardia on through to McCain Creek, it looks a total mess because it's not being cleaned out every year or anything. And I'm asking that would be put on the bond issue. There needs to be something, concreted or something to be put in that ditch because raccoons come out at night, they jump in the trash cans and all of that. And so it's a nuisance. And again, we should not, we are tax-paying citizens in this Cooper Road area. Since we've been into the city, the only thing that we've really gotten is garbage service. That's it. It's like we don't pay any taxes, and whatever we ask for, it's never done. It's never done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm asking that this would be put in the bond issue this time.
So I hear a point about maintenance and also about possibly cementing it to make it a harder surface and improving it, which would be a bond matter.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person, please, come forward.
Good evening.
Good evening to you.
And I'm Bernice Hunt, and I also live in University Park. I've been there since 1971, and we haven't had a street repair since I've been there. And mostly, like she said, it's the drainage and the street repair. So.
I'm going to ask Mr. Dark to come up here because it's,
Just really wanted to make sure that something that is underway, the two of y'all that have asked about University Park, through the efforts of the state legislator folks, there is actually some state capital outlay money that we're matching for University Park for streets and drainage. I think the total counting what the state's given us for the current year is right at $1 million. As soon as the state tells us we can start doing some of that, there will be some work. Now, there's more work needed than that will do, but they promise us there's going to be some more money next year. It's actually, we've also put what is over and above what what we think the state's going to do on that list that we handed out today. So we're really aware of that one. I think you will see work there sooner than later.
Oh, okay.
Just wanted to let you know that.
there's some good news for you. Please come forward. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Rose Williams. I'm also a resident of University Park. I live at 2755 Circle Drive in Shreveport. And I have a major concern about Audrey Lane, not just University Park. That road is terrible. It's been repaired over and over, and I hear you're having accidents down there. But that street is terrible, and I'm concerned about it because it runs outside of University Park, and it is a main thoroughfare.
So it's a street you use to get into the University Park neighborhood?
Yeah, but it's
Yes.
outside. It's going towards MLK, but it's outside of University Park.
Good news for through the actions of between the administration and city council earlier this year, the cost of Audrey Lane is funded already. It was funded out of some money we had extra in sales tax this year, and it's being designed right now. So you will see that one much sooner than later.
Okay. Are you able to tell me how far along that is? I've heard it's been
See the gentleman over there who's lost more hair than I have? He's the city engineer, Patrick Furlong, and you can ask him that question after the meeting, and he will be happy to answer
Okay.
all of it.
All right, thank you.
Because there's two parts to Audrey Lane. MLK come between it. So our side back by University Park is terrible. And hopefully it's not just on the other side. Hopefully it's on the University Park side too.
Mr. Dark is saying it's on the University Park side where that improvement is already being developed right now to happen. So that's good news. Good evening. How are
Good
you?
evening. My name is Carol Smith. My address is 2630 Kemp Lane. I'm just going to tell you how I drive down Audrey Lane.
And you're happy to hear that something's going to be happening. There you go. See, I'm getting it up here. All right, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Talk
My
to
name's
us.
Hi, I'm Daphne Tebow. My address is 5616 South Lakeshore Drive. But my question is, because I live in the city, I'm from the area, has anyone had a field trip or taken a field trip, road trip, so to speak, around the city to look at all of the streets? Because I know that we're talking about a bond issue to address the city, and so of course in the area here, but just around the city, has anyone taken a road trip?
So let me begin with trying to respond to that.
Okay.
So Mr. Dark has asked the city department to do that and assess it.
Okay.
And so there is a grid that they have of the streets, those that need the most. Mr. Dark was out today driving streets himself.
Okay.
The committee has talked that we're going to have a Saturday morning where we have a bus, and we're going to go around and see some of the problem situations or challenges or opportunities also. They'll include perhaps something with SPAR, include perhaps something with water, something with sewer, et cetera. So the Academy for the Police and Fire Academy, which is in dire need of some work. So we do plan that. We obviously, as citizens, can't get around and get to all the streets. That's why there is the representation that there is here. Because when we're talking about streets, I can assure you that the Conso districts got represented by people who are there, because I may not drive on the streets in A, for example, that often, but there are people here that drive it every day.
Exactly.
And so that input's getting, but that's why we also have this meeting tonight for you to come forward.
Got it, and that's why I wanted to come up. I also work here at Southern University Shreveport, so this
Good for
area
you.
is very important to me as well. But for those that are sitting on the panel, because they do drive these streets, I want to know if they have input about them driving along those streets in those various areas that they can bring back.
And
to
they
speak to.
have.
They have, okay. Okay,
It's a continuing process.
okay.
But yes.
All righty, thank you.
Next person to come forward, please. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
Come on up and talk to us.
My name is Mary L. Harris, 1827 McMarshall Drive, Shreveport, 71107. My concern is if we're just not discussing the bond issue, why is it on the ballot now to be voted on?
It will be
Just
on the
discussing
ballot
it. I mean,
in,
it's on the ballot to.
later in the spring. It's not on a ballot right now.
It's
What
on
we're
the
doing
ballot,
is
the
trying
bond
to get
issue.
input as to what it would be that would be put forward, and then we'll make a recommendation to the mayor and the city council, but the city council will ultimately be the one body that'll make the decision whether actually to go forward to you, the citizens, for a vote or not to do so. But if there is a bond referendum, it'll be in the spring when that'll happen.
Okay, so am I misunderstanding my ballot to say the millage is not
The
pertaining
Kettle
to this
Parish
at all?
has something
That's
right
the
now,
parish? Okay, thank you.
but the city does not.
Okay.
Tom, any correction to that? Okay, thank you. The next person, please come forward. As he's coming forward, I think one of the things that all the members were talking about is what a wonderful facility this is out here. I was retired as chancellor at LSUS on June 30th of this year, and I was out here 3 or 4 times in this room for events. But this was really needed for SUSLA, so it's really a pride point for the community as well as for SUSLA for this room. All right, sir, thank you. Please talk to us.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
My name is Antoine Patton, like the General Patton. I live at 1680 Templeman Street in Shreveport. A famous person once said, if everybody's thinking the same, then nobody's thinking. General George S. Patton. I also heard earlier this year that someone said, Shreveport is dying. There's nothing here. But I beg the difference. Shreveport is one of the most historical, next to New Orleans, in the state of Louisiana. We've got 5 priests that worked through the plague when Shreveport was founded that is up for canonization. That's tourist money coming from all over the world. I look on this proposal, and I look at the streets, and I don't even see Ford Street on here. Ford Street is a major street that most of the people who works downtown take every day. I live there. I see it. There was one while when Mayor Ollie Tyler was here, all the pipes and things were right there all down 4th Street. Then all of a sudden they went away. We have been paying for bond issues for streets for years. And somebody in the neighborhood says, where's the money? So as an advocate of Allendale Lakeside area, I'm going to find the truth out. Because my people in my neighborhood are concerned. Yeah, there's a few of them that say, well, they're going to do what they want to do. But I tell them, if you get out and vote, they can't do what they want to do. So, as a bond issue, we all got issues and things we need to do. But if we want Shreveport to be that tourist city that sits on the hill that other cities, you know what, I want to kind of be like Shreveport. There's certain areas, historical areas, that needs to be taken care of first, because this will bring in the tourist money. I live in a historical house on 1680 Tillman Street. MLK did his speeches for the civil rights leaders in my house. The first black printing press in Shreveport was started in my basement.
Wow.
The lady who got murdered in my house was a civil rights leader. So, up the street from my house on Pure Avenue, the historical place just got burned down last year. It was the first black fire station in Shreveport. In Allendale area, we have no places for the kids to play, to go swim, to learn how to swim. These things need to be looked at also. But I see these streets being done. I go down these streets every day. Hearn Avenue, at 12 o'clock midnight, when I get off work, the lights are out all the way to Booker T. Washington Golf Course. There's people who are intoxicated, who are full of drugs, things like that, to walk in the middle of the street, and nobody is trying to fix it. I didn't call SWEPCO. I didn't call the city.
Your
City
3
said
minutes are up,
SWEPCO.
but I'm going to grant you 2 additional minutes.
Yes, sir. So I think as when we're doing our streets, we need to look at our historical area first. This will bring in the revenues and the tourists that we need in order to have more income to work the outer city. So the city has started, Shreveport was started in the Allendale area. It was called Ledbetter Heights. And from there, that's the foundation which needs to spread out through all the city. So I think we need to take care of Ford Street and the surrounding areas and move on out. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dart, would you like to come forward, please? By the way, that was a very interesting history lesson.
Thank you, General Patton. I actually have something for you. Ford Street, the reason Ford hasn't been done is that there's a bunch of water and sewer mains under it that are eroding it, and that Ford is a state highway, and the state doesn't want to do it until we do that. We actually will have a request in front of the city council at some point in the next month or so that will fund the work to get the water and sewer mains out of there and fixed, so that the state or the parish or whoever's going to actually fix the road can do it. So that one has gotten a lot of attention. And if you need some more details on that, the gentleman there in the blue shirt is from Water and Sewer, and he can help you. And you got another blue shirt over there. Thank you.
Very good. You know, I think that's one of the things that's really important about this evening, that you have things that are obviously that you're having to deal with, and the opportunity for you to hear that there are some things in planning or that are being talked about being done, but not just talk with a plan to do it, is really important. So thank you. Next person to come forward, please. Good evening to you.
Irma Rogers, 1920 Michoud Street, Shreveport, Louisiana, 71107. I will begin by speaking about what was the 2019 bond issue and going back to 2010. In 2010, and prior to that, what these ladies are talking about from University Park standpoint, it was built without a complete drainage system. That was being discussed since 2004, 2007, all the way back to Keith Hightower. Okay, so just to make you understand. Also, having been annexed, most of it from the city's records, when I pulled them and asked for them from your city workers in 2014, MLK was annexed, most of it in 1977, the rest in 1978. So now we have 45 years of having problems with our streets and drainage systems. So when you hear a lot of these, and I did call, didn't I call half y'all? Mm-hmm. Okay, and some people over here to tell them, please come and say something about your streets tonight.
Thank you for doing so. Okay.
From this bond issue, though, some of the reasons that this one was killed is because $36 million of economic development was pulled off of that one. $36 million in terms of economic development, tire recycling facility, glass recycling facility, some things that we have sitting vacant, like Libby Glass, that could do some things that would give us workforce development, job and employment for some of the young people who seem to be having no jobs, no places to go, and not enough economic funding for them to stay here. I think as reported last week at your meeting, none of my children live here. The economy and looking at the job discrepancies in terms of salaries is one of the reasons. So I will put this down, but I have it. I'm sure you can get it.
And thank you. You provided us a list of streets last week at our
I
meeting as
did.
well, and we have that to
That
work
one
with.
was not a complete list. That one was this list, I think is what I gave Mr. Dark.
Yes.
A more complete list was 29 streets that was actually submitted.
Thank you.
These were the numbers that really went out with that task force report, the one with Mr. Larry English and Ms. Linda Benacki that chaired it back when Mayor Perkins was in office. So we had almost 30 streets and probably a couple of side streets. My question about that, having had so many of those, I'm looking at this proposal. Is this part of the proposal for the $300 million bond? Am I correct?
Those have
Okay.
come forward from the city directors, so they've not been vetted by the committee. They're matters that have come forward to be considered.
Okay, so this,
Saving streets, we actually did not list a lot of individual streets,
Mhm.
because we're going to put all those in after we get through with the four.
So the individual streets aren't there.
We just kind of put in a placeholder number there, that, you know, lots and lots of street money is needed, but we're gonna wait and see what exact streets after we hear.
So they haven't been prioritized. There's a plug number around 50 million, and it may not be able to be that high, but there's a plug number that's in there without designating the particular streets yet. But we have the list that you gave to us at our last meeting, which looking, and then what projects do they have underway, which Mr. Dark has come up to talk
I
about
do
some
have
of
a
those.
copy, and
So they're
I
trying to
just-
correlate those to see
Right.
what might be there, and that will go towards the ultimate recommendation to the city council of what to include in terms of streets.
okay, certainly, because the copy with the 8 streets on it, Thomas E. Howard, Downing Street, Willie Mays, Norton Drive, A-Line Circle, Jackie Robinson, Audrey Lane, and David Rains Road. This is from March 2023 from Mr. Furlong, but they were kind enough to give me an updated copy. I did not get it in email, so he just passed it to me. And I was able to look at it and see that some of the streets have been out to bid, et cetera. Some of them have to be rebid. Howsoever.
I'm going to give you additional minutes also because it's a continuation of your presentation of last week.
I appreciate that. If you're looking at this, and I'm looking at public safety was the only thing that passed on the last one that just passed for the police, okay? On the backside of this, medical corridor improvements, $12.5 million. Collect and arterial street reconstruction, those are the ones that you're saying that they are lumped in together but have not been delineated, okay? Then neighborhood street reconstruction, $25 million, that's $50 million right there. So surely, all of our streets can be done with this portions of the money. Now, $12.5 million, I do understand in investing in that medical corridor. I went on that trip to Alabama, Birmingham, under Mayor Glover's administration. And UAB owns half of downtown, the buildings, the things that we're doing at CMIT right now on Kings Highway are things they were doing that many years ago. So having that, I do understand, but we do have to focus on what is most important to our taxpayers right now before we go into the things that we think may be more lavish. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening. Once again, my name is Carol Smith. I live at 2630 Kemp Lane, but I'm speaking on behalf of the people that live over here off Hersey D. Wilson, the 1661 Hersey D. Wilson over there by Northside Drive. That they need a sound barrier back up in there. They put the highway through there, but when they sleep at night, they can't really rest. That's exactly what they was telling me when I was talking to them. So if we can find some way to put up a sound barrier over in that area, it really will help the people over there. Because back up in there, it has been down, I drove down through there, and it is horrible. So please, give them a sound barrier. Thank you.
Mr. Dark, is there anything about a sound barrier? Let me, while he's coming up here, recognize Representative Cedric Glover, who's walked in here. Thank you, sir. It was your bond issue that was the last one of a major bond issue to pass in 2011. So we certainly need to take lessons from you in terms of what we might be doing. Mr. Dark.
The road that's making the noise is the I-49 extension, correct? Okay. The only thing we can do with that is ask the state to do it. The city doesn't do interstate highways at all, except maintain the grass and stuff like that. But the city engineer who's sitting back there can write that letter or make that email to the state and ask them to do that. But that's not a city responsibility, but we'll be happy to communicate it to the folks that will, and you can ask Cedric Glover to fund it if you really want.
Very good. We're getting results going here. It's wonderful. Good evening to you.
Good evening, everyone.
Speak to us.
I am Helena Hollingsworth, residence 1343 Andrew Avenue, Shreveport, Louisiana, District A, 71103. And I have a question in reference to this $25 million reconstruction, for neighborhood streets and construction. There is a ditch in the back of the 1300 block of Andrew that floods, that someone spoke earlier, that puts raccoons, snakes. We've called, we've gotten nowhere. I've owned that property since 2010, and it's frustrating. So you can put all the lime, everything that I could do from being a property owner, I've done, which is one of the reasons why I'm present here today, to get further knowledge on what could be done to make sure that that drainage will continue, because it floods our backyards.
So that is a continuing problem that you're facing in terms of something that needs to be able to be addressed. So I think Mr. Dark is noting that, and we have.
People there need to talk to you before you leave the building.
Public Works, will you put your hand up so she can turn around and see who you are? Okay. Spot them. Get them.
Don't let them leave.
Don't let them leave.
Okay. So again, my question would be, would that be considered a part of the 25 million reconstruction?
It
or
would
is
probably not be. It sounds like what you need is action actually happening, unless I did not hear.
If we were going to make the ditch bigger or pave it or something like that, that would be, but that's not part of the street work itself.
Okay, because when you come down Harp Street, I'm just thinking, you know, from a layman's point of view, because of the concrete is broken, busted, you know, again, like everyone's talking about in reference to street issues.
Yeah, that would be an issue, but
Okay.
That's a drainage issue, not a street issue. So he
Probably
can.
a maintenance issue.
Uh-huh.
But talk to them and see what they can help you do.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Next person to come forward.
Follow-up question, if I may.
Will you come to the mic so you can be recorded here, please? You can come around the front, Ms. Patton.
And just ask for a little more time. I got a follow-up question for the city engineer. In doing the streets, the procurement of the concrete, are we actually using the same companies that we have been using here in Shreveport, or are we going to other states who have better concrete that we can take a chance and look at how they do it? Because the concrete companies that we have been using, I worked at Willis Knight and I worked at Christus Hospital, and I talked to people who work there dealing with the concrete, and the concrete here in Shreveport, somehow it's not sufficient enough as it is in Texas. And because the guys in Texas said they could go right across the border in Texas and get the concrete cheaper than they can here. Is there a monopoly on that or what?
You and the city engineer will have to have that conversation.
So,
Refuse to practice engineering at all.
so from having been the chancellor at LSU Shreveport and having a number of projects bidded out, I can tell you the state has a very long list of expectations, regulations, and what must happen. And when the lowest bidder meets those requirements that are listed when it's bid out, that's it. And we might have chosen or wanted to do different things, but we're driven by the ultimate number. And so I think that is what you're going to find when you get to the end of the evening and have that discussion that Mr. Dark is suggesting. It's that the mayor has little ability to make a change for that, and perhaps that's good that a mayor doesn't. But that's the challenge. Next person to come forward, please.
My apologies, Dr. Clark. I did forget to strongly suggest that you take the field trip. When we had the field trip back in like 2014 under Mayor Glover,
Yes.
we did discover some 6-inch drop-offs in some of our streets, like on LaGuardia, David Raines, and Audrey Lane. So a field trip may give you more insight as to what we drive on every day.
And I would welcome, because you've looked at this very closely, you've been before us now twice, if you have some suggestions in particular where you think the bus ought to go, and don't get us in too big a hole so we can't get the bus out, but we would take your suggestions and consider those. Next person to come forward, please. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Eric Hatfield. I own property in Shreveport, and I'm born and raised and I've lived here my whole life. So I'll make it quick, but one, in response to the lady that was here previously, obviously we can all agree that some of the streets definitely need, like 31, 32, if you got on that in a bus, you need a helmet and shoulder pads. So there are some, but those things didn't happen during, like that street didn't happen during this administration with Tom Arsenault or with Mayor Glover. It was before, it was way back. And so the best way to do it is just to address it now, because it's, it's what's done is done. The other thing is, one, I want to thank, I want to thank all of you on this board for being here, for caring enough to come out here and spend your evening here. Mr. Dark, Mayor Arsenault, Mr. Glover, all of you, and everybody out there, and the people that come out here, because it means something to y'all. So, I guess the one thing I would talk about is my question is so when you use contractors, I do think that we have many good contractors here locally, but I do think that you should also vet these contractors to make sure that you see previous work, make sure that they don't have complaints with the contractor licensing board, make sure they bond these things so they can stand behind them, so that 5 years down the road, so once they've been paid, then there's some recourse to come back on these contractors, because we are using out-of-town contractors that are the low bidders. However, just because they're the low bidder, they may not be vetted. They may be brand new contractors, and I've seen that in Shreveport, which there are contractors that will start an LLC, get a contractor license, and the next day they're doing work, and they're scrambling trying to hire other contractors that do know what they're doing. So vetting the contractors would definitely, and make sure that they're doing good work, makes all of you look good, makes the mayor's office look good, and everyone, and it makes the citizens happy, and there'll be less citizens here complaining if we vet them and do those things. So that's it.
Thank you for your
Go ahead.
recommendation.
Thank you very much.
And I do want to say, it's the people here in the audience, you're the ones who make this evening be of value. So thank you to those of you who have shown up and are here giving us input. Thank you. I saw someone started to move. There she is. Come on forward, please. Good evening to you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Katie Collins, and I live at 2048 Addition Avenue. And my concern is the street on Addition, that it is too narrow. You can't hardly pass. And if you park on the street, you can't hardly get by. The garbage truck comes in, they bags in. If you're on the side of the street, they can't get down there. And your garbage is left until the next week, or they finally send somebody out to pick
Excuse
it
me,
up.
can you say again the street that we're talking about?
Addition.
Okay, thank you.
And the other thing, my house is backyard adjacent to Ice Cream Street. The storm came. All of these limbs are down. It's an eyesore. I have talked about the trash. People are just coming by, they dumping bags of trash. I'm the one who picks it up, because that's where I be. That's my little hole back there. And I get tired of looking at that. I asked my city councilman, could she get me a no dumping sign? A no dumping sign. Maybe that will help me out. But we really need to get our streets back. So you can be able to pass. Children are walking, going to the bus stop. They don't have a sidewalk. They all have to get off in the ditch most of the times. So that is a that is
Especially in bad weather, that's a problem.
that's a problem. So if you could just make I was told a few years ago, 24 feet across. That's what they allow. But that's not enough room. Because every household probably have 3 or 4 cars, and you can only put 2 cars in your driveway. So that's a problem for us. I mean, not only on Addition, all the streets I have went down, LaGuardia, Princess Elaine, all of them are just too narrow for me. Now, I just really believe that we could do something about that. And if you would just look into that for me, I would be more than happy, whatever you can do for us.
Thank you for coming forward. Next person to come forward to speak with us, please.
Councilwoman Tabitha
Mr. Dart.
Taylor.
Oh, go ahead, please. Good evening.
Councilwoman Tabitha Taylor, I represent District A. Most of the things that you are hearing tonight is why it's imperative for you to take a tour. This is 5 miles of one neighborhood, which is one of your largest African-American neighborhoods in the United States. You would do yourself a disservice by not driving through this community to look at the streets. In 1978, I grew up here. This is my home. In 1978, we were annexed on to the city of Shreveport. As a result of that annexation, the city of Shreveport received an enormous amount of federal funding for streets and infrastructure that most of these marginalized communities, including the MLK area, Allendale, did not receive their fair share. So when you're sitting here and you're listening to the residents here that are telling you, and I think that you heard Chief Reese say in the last bond committee meeting, whereas that fire trucks cannot drive down the street because they actually fall in the ditch, where you are able to drive on your streets and 2 cars can pass, that's not the same thing for streets here in the MLK area as well as the Allendale community. That is just the reality of where we live. And you may not ever see this because you won't have to drive up this way. Our area we don't have things that customarily that other parts of the city has. And so sometimes the administration may get a little teed with me when I tell them that your reality is not our reality. And when I say our reality, because I drive up here, my grandmother lives right there. My aunt lives right there. So I have to come and drive down these streets because this is where I'm from. So when you talk to us about a bond issue, yes, we look at you like this. Really? Really? Because it's the reality. But until you see it, you won't understand the pain and the frustration that we feel. You call it anger. I call it we being tired. And it is passion that I have for my district. Because I get tired of Sandra Mack calling me about that ditch. I get sick of that. I get sick. I got to listen to Mr. Patton tell me how he has to drive by Temperman, which is history within the city of Shreveport, because it's where Ann Brewster died. And if you don't know who she is, look her up. But this is our reality. I drive down these streets and it's trees and vegetation coming out of the streets. It is grass. You cannot see the sewer. And I'm telling you, there is not one director in this city that cannot tell you that they don't have emails from me regarding this. So until you see what we're talking about, this bond issue is mute to me. Until you get a full understanding of what it means, because these are taxpayers. I'm still paying my mortgage. They own their home. That's the reality. And until Shreveport comes together and look at the inner core of this city and know that we have to build from the inside out. I'm sorry, but I'm not letting y'all take my credit. The drainage project that you see for University Park is because I requested a capital outlay request to Representative Glover. You had over $150 million worth of projects that you brought here under the Perkins administration. These streets that you see you getting fixed is because I raised hell about them to get fixed. Nobody is taking that credit. It comes from this loudmouth councilwoman right here. And so as I sit here, and it is no discredit to you, I am asking you, as the councilwoman who represents District G, hell, I'll get a bus and take you myself and tell you to come and see our streets. But until you understand my pain, until you understand the pain of my constituents, then I'm telling you, we don't see the real side of Shreveport. You cannot put your face over it.
Thank you. Let me ask, on behalf of the committee, you'll come with us for the bus? And with Ms. Rogers, we'll have her come as well with her list? Because in all seriousness, I think we understand as a group of citizens that there's no credibility to what we suggest to you as a city council person and your colleagues if we don't address some of the very underlying issues that you're speaking about and people here are speaking about. We get that. And so we have to try to understand and work with that. And we're new to this. This isn't something that we do every day. And so we're learning. And so we thank you for helping us on that journey that we're on to learn to come forward. We thank you. Sir.
Yes, I'm Craig Lee. I have a few questions for the bond committee. How many bonds have been passed in Shreveport over the past 50 years?
The past 50 years?
Yeah.
I would say that Representative Glover might have the best, and the Mayor Arsenault might have the best. If you go 50 years, I mean, if you talk about 2021, there was only one that passed, one proposition of the 5, as you know. 2019, there were 3 propositions, none of them passed in 2019. In 2011, Mayor Cedric Glover, there were 4 propositions for $175 million, all passed. Three passed. SPAR was part of police and fire there. And so they were not separate. They were part of police and fire, my bad. And so there were 3, they all passed. I need help to go back.
And I would think that the history.
Thank you, sir.
And I would think that the history of the bond issues for any committee, you need to have an understanding as to what has passed, because Tabitha just hit on something that's key. There are bond issues that pass and projects supposed to get done that never get done. So I remember this project that was supposed to get done with one bond issue that was a Lakeside Recreation Center for Ledbetter Heights. Never got done. Knight Street was a part of the 2011 bond issue. Never got done. I think they're trying to find the money now. So if people vote on a bond issue and it's supposed to get done and it doesn't get done, why should voters have confidence that the projects are going to get done? I know that there's a process.
So if I could address that, which is your input, but this is all for the committee for input. We asked that question with Mr. Dark at the last meeting. And Mr. Dark, I'll put you on the spot. I believe that you told us that the Knight Street project, which Mr. Lee is talking about, is the last major project remaining in the 2011 bond issue to be completed. And that you're trying to get that completed. The work is going on trying to get that completed before there would be the bond referendum if it should occur in April. Did I capture what you said correctly? So but there's no question in terms of the accountability that we're just talking about, that the council member was just talking about. That is important. The committee has gone back to say what had happened going back to Cedric Glover's term and what happened with that bond issue, because going back to 2001, it's just too much history. There too many things have changed. And so we wanted to be sure that we were able to say that those things that were there in the 2011, the three propositions, that they've been addressed. And again, the Knight Street is a glaring example of what is yet to be done, a glaring example. But that's what we wanted as a committee, to be assured of that. And then to see from that point, there's just been a number of things. There were some things, and Mayor Perkins had forward that he made with his administration, what they were going to attempt to do that didn't get passed. So we have some of those that sit out there. So there's a number of things sitting there, but that's the answer. We chose, as by being the chair, not to go beyond Mayor Cedric Glover's bond issue, to go back any further than that, to try to see what was done or not done.
But if you don't go back further than that, then you don't understand the concerns that the individuals either in the Cooper Road, Lakeside have, because those extenuating situations continue to persist today, and you're wanting voters to have confidence that if they pass a bond, the projects are gonna get done. Yet
so-
Knight Street, even if you go back to 2011, is not done.
Yes, sir.
But
And so what the
people voted on
committee's
the bond
approach
issue.
is being, as when Ms. Rogers came in last week with what she was talking about, was to say that if it was not in the 2021 specifically to be done, or excuse me, in the 2011, or 2011, yes. We hear those things that need to be done. We've heard a lot what needs to be done tonight. So whether it was in 2001, if it was promised or not, or any time before that, we've heard about going even back to when it was annexed up here, and with the federal money that came in. But our concern is looking at those streets that exist today with what has to happen, and to prioritize those. And this area has a lot of need up here. There's a lot of need. And so we're focused on that.
Can you break down the process of going from passing bond to now gaining access to the revenues needed to actually complete a project? Because I know all of the money doesn't come in at once.
So
And I
let me
think that'll
ask
help.
Mr. Dark, and again, one of the reasons why I've changed, I told you at the outset 3 minutes, but so many of you came forward. Now we're trying to use this opportunity to have a discussion to help you to understand processes and what things are happening. So I hope you recognize that I have not kept to the 3 minutes with Mr. Lee just now, but I'm trying to have some understanding of things. Mr. Dark, please.
Mr. Lee, the short version is that at least what I'm used to is, say if you sell X million dollars worth of bonds, those will be sold over a period usually of 3 or 4 years. Usually the first year is the stuff that was actually ready to do right now, plus getting architects and engineers and right of way and all that for those other things. And then as you go, because if you sell them all at once, you got to start paying the debt all at once, and that makes your taxes go up faster than they would otherwise. So what you would assume would happen is whatever passes, you end up saying, okay, what's ready right now? Let's try to make sure that's in the first sale. What do you need for design or right-of-way or whatever else you need to get to where the next year you've got projects ready to go, or the really complicated ones, you got a year after that. I mean, as a, for instance, the police building was in the 2021 one that was passed under Mayor Perkins. They're in the process of hiring an architect right now to do that. And, so we have not sold the bonds for that construction yet, because it would be silly to have them just sitting there and us having to pay the debt on them. But that's the way it's supposed to work.
So we're talking about a process that actually could take 15 years.
More like 5, if you do it right, anyway. I mean, what we have tried to say to citizens and to the committee is what you're really talking about is the work that's going to get done presumably over the next 3 to 5 years. In fact, when we try to do cost estimates for these as staff, we don't try to give you a cost estimate for what it costs today. It's really trying to give you one for what it might cost a year and a half down the road or 2 years down the road, so that we don't have a situation like Knight Street where they had a certain amount of money and it wasn't enough, and they went and got some more money and it's still not enough. But we hope to have a solution for Knight before the end of the year, because it is a credibility problem. Oh, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Dark. Please come forward, sir.
Hi, my name is Sam Brock. My address is 333 Colony Bend, Shreveport, 71115. I actually just came to listen tonight and not talk about streets, but as I've heard people talking about narrow streets, it reminded me of one, and I noticed that it looks like you're taking notes on streets to look at. My children went to Eden Gardens Elementary School and Caddo Middle Magnet in Cedar Grove. I didn't live there, and a lot of the students that go to school there don't live there, and most of them come in off of 70th Street and turn on MacArthur and Bethany and go up through the neighborhood. And it just reminded me of how dangerous those were for the 8 years that I was bringing my kids to school. They're very narrow streets. They don't even have a curb. They just drop straight into a ditch. There's school buses that come through there, and there's tons of traffic coming into the neighborhood on those two because of all the students that go to school there that don't live in the neighborhood. So I just wanted to point those out because I remembered from 10 years ago noticing that, and I don't think they've changed. So if you could add those to the list.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next person to come forward, please. A point of order. Come to the mic for your point of order.
Now we have got past the good stuff, it's time to take the gloves off. Do we need to have an independent counsel from the outside source to check why the money has not been spent?
I would say to you, this committee, it would take no position on that. We think that what we're trying to do is look to going forward. That's a city council member issue, I believe, not ours. We have enough problems just trying to get a priority of all the needs that are there in this city. There's just a phenomenal number of needs.
The reason I'm saying that is because
I don't disagree with what you're asking
Right.
about. I'm
I
just
heard
suggesting
Craig
that it's
talk.
beyond the scope of this committee to be able to do that.
I heard Craig talk. I grew up with Craig. Craig know about 4th Street. I know about the annex of MLK. I know a lot of people there. Matter of fact, our former mayor comes from that area, and we've been complaining about this for years and years and years and years. And it's like, okay, but nothing ever happens. So that's why I said the citizens might need to have a vote and see if we can get an independent counsel from outside to find out why we haven't got the service and the money and the things haven't been done the way they should be done.
Thank you. Let me take a moment and ask if there are any of my colleague members that you've heard a lot this evening. If any of you wish to make a comment, you're welcome to come up here if you would like to do so. Anyone? Mr. Glover, are you coming forward to make a comment?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then
But I'll yield to.
No, you're there. Go ahead, please, sir.
Let me first of all say good evening.
Good evening to you, sir.
And I want to say thank you to each of you for taking your time to serve for such a difficult task, because it is a very hard and challenging problem that you take on every time there is an effort to try and convene a body to make a recommendation regarding a list of projects to do or to propose to do when the need is unlimited. And part of the reason as to why that is complicated is because City of Shreveport is 187 years old. But it's only been since 1978 when you have had people who are a part of the decision-making process who look like Councilwoman Tabitha Taylor. With the exception of the dozen or so years during Reconstruction, the leadership and the power and the decision-making and the prioritization within this city was concentrated within a very small group of individuals. And those folks were able to make decisions that were obviously within their best interest and within the best interest of the people that they knew and cared the most about. The result of that was that up until 1978, there were parts of this city that did not have a seat at the table. They were not a voice in the process. And part of what further complicates the situation, especially being here within this particular neighborhood and having this conversation with this group of people, is that this neighborhood was only ever annexed into the city limits of Shreveport because it served the interests of the city of Shreveport. Up until that time, there was no desire, no interest, no inclination to annex the Cooper Road MLK area into the city. So it was an independent, unincorporated part of the parish that developed and cultivated its own identity and pretty much struck out on its own and had lots of folks here, including my parents, who thought it should seek to potentially become its own incorporated community. And it managed to be able to get leadership elected to the Caddo Police Jury as it existed at that time, and managed to be able to do things from an infrastructure standpoint in terms of improving streets, water system, sewer system, even formed its own independent volunteer fire department to address its needs and challenges. The annexation became a necessity because of the implications of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, where you had a lawsuit filed against the city of Shreveport that said it engaged in discriminatory annexation policies over the course of its history to effectively dilute the voting strength of black people who were in city limits at that time, to further limit their ability to be able to impact the decision-making process of the city of Shreveport. And so in order to be able to settle that lawsuit, and rather than face the possibility of having to de-annex certain parts of town, like Southern Hills and South Broadmoor and others that had been annexed in the 50s and the 60s, and even up to and after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, the decision was made to go and seek to annex this neighborhood into the city. Well, the reality is that in 1978, because of the leadership of so many people who are in this room and their friends and associates and parents and grandparents, the infrastructure within this community in terms of its demographics and compared to the similar demographics throughout the city of Shreveport was actually in much better shape. Every street on the Cooper Road in 1978 was hard paved, made of asphalt. All right? You had the ability to be able to drive on hard streets. We had our own water system, we had our own sewer system. That was not true throughout many parts of Black Shreveport in 1978. And so when you hear Councilwoman Taylor reference what happened in terms of what the infusion of these demographics into the city's population did in terms of increased federal dollars, that increase in federal dollars did not come back to further enhance and improve and address issues and challenges that still remain within the MLK Cooper Road community. They were used to get rid of the oil and dirt streets inside the black neighborhoods in the city of Shreveport. They were used to add water and sewer inside the neighborhoods within the city of Shreveport that did not have it, despite the fact they had been inside the city limits for decades and decades and decades. And so when you hear the frustration that you have coming forward to you all tonight, you need to understand the historical context from where it's coming from.
That's very helpful.
And I'll say this as I wrap up my comments. Part of what further serves to exacerbate that is that since 1978, we've had 7 council districts. Every decade, as a result of the census, we're required to do what? To redraw the district lines based upon the constitutional concept of one man, one vote. Each of those 7 districts have to have the same approximate numbers of people. Well, part of what has to happen in order to be able to equalize the numbers, and I saw this in the 1990 census after I came on the city council. City Council District A, in going into that redistricting process, had lost 30% of its population, which meant that in order for that population number for District A to equalize with the other districts, it had to do what? You can't force people to move into the district, so you have to change the lines. Those lines make an already challenged district bigger and makes an already well-seated district smaller. And so as you go forward over the last 45, 46, 47, however many years, part of the mentality, having served on the council, I understand, having been mayor, I understand as well, council members want to be what? Treated equally. So that as you saw in 2011 rather, when we had $44+ million in total for streets and drainage, 21 or 22 million of which was uncommitted and left to the discretion of the council in consultation with the administration to make a decision on what to do with it, what was the decision? Very easy. Split it 7 ways. But you've got one district that geographically is huge, historically long neglected, still trying to figure out how to catch up and address its problems with the same amount of sum that's going to a district that historically has had much better infrastructure. And so until you really stop and approach the kind of process that you're in right now from a historical perspective and view it through a historical lens, it becomes very difficult to ultimately come up with a solution or strategy that embodies equity. And what's needed in this situation is at least some acknowledgement of the reality that there are historical inequities that still have yet to be effectively addressed or significantly resolved, and in many instances, even acknowledged. Because many people approach this as if we all now have somehow ended up on the same place at the same time and in the same situation and circumstances. And that's just simply not the truth. And that's why I think you hear some of the frustration that you hear coming, and it becomes difficult to come up with the effective strategy to go forward. So I don't envy any of you for what you are in the midst of right now. In fact, I applaud you and I thank you because it is difficult, it is hard, but it is necessary. And I look forward to continue to see you all as you go through this process, and certainly we'll attend the next meeting and any others that I'm invited to be of any assistance I can in terms of helping to inform exactly where you are. Last thing I'll say before I take my seat, if you don't mind, Mr. Chancellor, and that is with regard to undone projects. Knight Street, and I won't go back and call anybody by name, but the problem is the project was put in with too little money from the beginning. The idea that even in 2011 you would be able to do that much work from Shreveport Barksdale Highway all the way back to, was that Preston Street, for $3.5 million, with all of that being new concrete, new sidewalks, and everything else, was just simply unrealistic from the beginning. Now, how that number ultimately got set may have been a series of conversations that went from what the actual engineers recommended to what the committee submitted to the council, and then ultimately what the council passed to put on the ballot. Where it ended up being a miss, still, history will judge that. Bottom line is, it was woefully inadequate from the beginning, and it's still inadequate at this point, and I wish the administration council luck in terms of trying to figure out what to do, because it is a problem that needs to be addressed as you all go forward doing the work that you're doing. Number two, the only project that has been on a bond proposal since 1996, to my awareness, that has not been done, because I, as chairman of the city council in 1995, 96, as I transitioned to the legislature, helped to shape that spring of 96 bond proposition, and saw what it did in terms of the David Raines Recreation Center, the A.B. Palmer Park, enclosing Mamie Hicks for the first time. It's why the north end of David Raines is paved. It's why Russell Road is paved, and so many other projects that came from that. The one project from that was the Ledbetter Heights Recreation Center, and here's what happened with that. The 20-year Section 8 vouchers on the housing in Ledbetter Heights expired about that same time. And as those housing vouchers expired on those housing units within Ledbetter Heights, the people who lived there then had the option of being able to choose to live somewhere else. And if you were around Shreveport during that time and you know about the 1100 block of Fannin and all the other things that happened with the Bottom Boys and what have you in 1994, you can understand that there were people who were choosing to avail themselves to live somewhere else besides Ledbetter Heights. So by the time that bond proposal passed and you transitioned from it into the Hightower administration, the realization was that the population within Ledbetter Heights was shrinking very quickly. So the idea of coming in and spending that much money to spend on a recreation center in a community that was quickly losing its population was something that the Hightower administration chose not to do. Having been the council member who spearheaded that project, because we got $500,000 from the Bureau administration to buy the 6.7 acres of land that now Millennium Studios sits on, and we were going to supplant that with the $1.5 million from the bond proposal. I came in as mayor saying, now let's go do it. The reality was there was nobody left there to do it for. And so we decided not to do it. And as I just looked up from 2012, resolution 76 from 2012 is the resolution of the Shreveport City Council after having held a public hearing. And you can find all, because back in those days, we still did verbatim minutes for city council meetings. So you can actually hear word for word everything that was said. You will find the discussion as to why it is that the decision was ultimately made after a public hearing to not go forward with that project, and those dollars ended up being reapportioned to other priorities within the Parks and Recreation Department. So you can find it up, and I'll probably post it somewhere, make it easier for people to find. Thank you much.
Representative Close, may I ask you
God
a
bless
question? You
Good luck to
mentioned
you.
in the 2011 bond issue that passed, the streets and drainage was 44 million and 22 million was left to be allocated out by need, and it got split out 7 ways equally. And I hear that as being a regret that you have that the bond package was set up in that way. How would you have set it up differently?
Well, and I guess the truth is that I think you've got to make a decision to do away with, and I know this is very difficult to do, and in fact, probably impossible, but you focus on the actual projects themselves as opposed to the geography of where they're located. Take away the lines and focus on the needs as opposed to, unfortunately, yielding to what we all acknowledge to be the political realities of how these things work. The easiest compromise to strike with the council was for them to say, it's fair to split 7 ways. I think what you have to do is to decide that and use the history of what transpired. As an example, part of that bus tour that you heard Ms. Rogers make reference to from 2014 was a part of an effort that we followed the 2011 bond proposal with, which was an effort that was geared towards trying to further address the street needs. Because out of all the things that you guys are going to deal with, whether it's parks and recreation, water and sewer, drainage and what have you, the one that's going to be the most predominant in the conversation is going to be the streets. We recognized in 2011 that that was a completely inadequate number. We also recognized that Shreveport at the time had a SWEPCO franchise fee that was at 3% in comparison to every other municipality in the surrounding area, which is already set at 5%. Adjusting our franchise fee up to the regional average provided an opportunity for us to get an additional $10 million per year in revenue. Our further idea was to increase that franchise fee, get that additional revenue, put it into a special streets revenue fund, but then go one step further. And that was to issue revenue bonds, which don't require a vote of the people, but can be done by a vote of the council, just as you do with water and sewer improvements, because they come through the enterprise fund. That's the water and sewer system. And we proposed at that point to do about $100 million of additional street work based upon not the political proclivities of the council or the administration, but what had been identified by staff. And we even used, we added one of the things called, I'm sure the city still has, the pavement management system, where we had these trucks that go out and drive throughout the city and rate all the pavement and give you this list of
And they have rated the streets.
Exactly. And we said we'll get that sum of money by issuing revenue bonds, and then we'll go and we'll do the projects based upon the priorities that are identified through the pavement management system. And we put that up before the council about a dozen times up until my last meeting as mayor. And we got 3 votes every time, we just couldn't get the 4th. But that was intended to account for the fact that what we had done with that 22 million was the politically expedient thing to do, and those additional funds for street improvements would have come back and actually addressed the identified needs as we saw them across the city.
By using the enterprise fund approach.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
So,
Thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, thank you for that. I don't want to cut off people who want to still come forward. If there's anyone who still wishes to come forward. If not, let me turn to the members here. If any of you would like to come forward, any comments or thoughts that you would like to make to the group. You've heard a lot of different things here, And we have one member who's here for the first time tonight, representing Council A, who's coming in because there was a vacancy occurred. And so there's been a lot to get, right, in one night? There you go. But anyone here wish to? I think, check me and see if I'm capturing. We've heard a lot this evening from you.
Can I offer one additional?
Yes, please, come back.
Wrap up, since nobody else wants to speak again.
Come.
Because it's a clarification of comments that were made by both Mr. Dark and Councilwoman Taylor, and that is, for the folks in University Park, there actually is in House Bill 2, page 106, a capital outlay appropriation for $8,375,000, which represents the funding that was identified under the Fix Shreveport Streets Now initiative to come in and address the problem in University Park. University Park was built in the late 60s, early 70s. It was the first neighborhood in this, part of this neighborhood to have concrete streets and sidewalks. But what it did not have constructed with it was a subsurface drainage system to be able to effectively get rid of the water. And so that money is within House Bill 2. Of that $8.375 million, there is $750,000 of it in cash that is immediately available for the city to be able to use within this current fiscal year. It's intended hopefully to do the engineering and design work for that overall project with the intent being to go back and get the trailing funds in future years. So,
terrific, great. Loved hearing about that. Thank you for your work, your leadership for making that happen. So we've heard a lot from you. And as I told you, it's for us, this is new for us. We all have, I'm now retired, but most of the people up here have a day job. They're working, and it's not this, nor was it this for me. But we've come here, we've heard from you, you've talked to us. Thank you for choosing to come tonight. To come and talk in front of a bunch of people here, that takes a lot. And we appreciate the fact you chose to do so, because we have to hear from the community. And we have to hear the concerns, and the different people have spoke. Mr. Lee, we heard from you, for example. I don't want to be calling out, and we heard from our historian who left. There he is. He's right back there. But, you know, we've heard a lot of different things tonight, and it's important. And what we're going to be doing is having 3 more community meetings. So they're not directed. This was not simply a Council District A meeting. It was a meeting in North Shreveport, but obviously it's in A, and we heard the concerns, and a very historical presentation that Representative Glover made was very helpful, and others, and the city council member made, were very helpful to us to hear and understand. We need context. We need to understand that. And so we've achieved context tonight, and we will have a tour. Your council member up here, I love her passion. She reminds me of the LSU women's basketball coach, doesn't she? She's going to go win it. And I love that, what I see with her passion. And so we're going to be looking for opportunities to learn what it is. I assure you, we don't unfortunately have enough time to be in a bus all over Shreveport, being everywhere, but we're going to prioritize, and I assure you that we'll have in prioritizing what we do, we will come to District A. And we will try to see what are those key point things that need to be looked at to get an idea. We only can try to get an idea, and we pledge to you that we will do that, and we hear you. And we hope that you will check us and look to see what we do, and we will come forward as a community group coming forward, trying to do the best we can. We thank you tonight for coming and joining us. Thank you very much.